But a number of years ago, I mean, this predates AI. Certainly, I did a small study with some colleagues in surgery of a Facebook group for robotic surgeons. And it was this fascinating group because robotic surgery, certainly at the time, this was maybe 2018 or so, but still continues to be a fairly niche practice, right? You don't have tons and tons of robotic surgeons around. So you may be the only robotic surgeon in a 50-mile radius. Certainly a robotic surgeon doing one particular type of procedure. So getting that informal knowledge, feedback, advice, mentoring can be quite challenging. But what these surgeons figured out pretty quickly is that as they're doing the robotic surgery, they use a camera for it, and that camera can record. And one of the beautiful things about doing surgery on the inside is most people's insides are HIPAA compliant, right? We're not, like, I can't identify you by your spleen.
Right.
So it's a much lower barrier to then be able to say, hey, I'm going to post this video of me doing my robotic surgery procedure on Facebook. And there's going to be a community of a couple thousand robotic surgeons around the world who, because they're in different time zones, essentially are a 24-hour think tank to basically just throw the video up and say, hey, what do you guys think of the way that I approached it? Or I tried this new procedure that Dr. So-and-so had recommended on here last month, and it worked great. Look at how it went. Or, hey, this is what I was looking at. What would you have done here? And we found that it was actually quite active. I mean, people would comment pretty regularly. They would pass feedback along back and forth. Now, it was a private group, so you had to be invited in to be a member. Presumably, you had to provide some sort of proof that you were actually a robotic surgeon. And there have been some legal protections afforded to groups like that, that essentially they consider it an online version of the doctor's lounge. Mm-hmm. And just like what we were talking about with AI, asking your friend, what would you have done in this situation, does not then make them liable or you any differently liable for the outcome of the surgery that you performed. And so again, even pre-COVID, pre-AI, we were seeing this sort of, I don't want to say a backdoor use, but like this sort of unintended use of some of these large scale social media platforms.
So community of practice basically built on Facebook for learning kind of, and this is, I'm going to use this word intentionally to get you into it, but like this is vicarious learning through your peers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think there's a question of, would that be better? Would we all feel better and or would it be better, which are two different questions, if that forum was hosted by the American Surgical Association, if it was some website that they logged into? What I can tell you for sure is it would get used a lot less if it was hosted by American Surgical Association instead of a group on Facebook. I think it's another login, it's another access. Who's logging on to American Surgical Association every day? Facebook, it pops up. I was a member of this group for a short time while we were studying it. It shows right up on your feed. There's nothing like going to like birthday party, new kid,
spleen,
colonoscopy, it makes for a very interesting scroll. But on the other hand, it's right when you scroll a very common thing. And as we know with research on communities of practice, the more accessible and central to your day-to-day interaction they are, the more you're going to use them. So again, I think that this question of, do we do it on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter was a huge hub for a long time of academic knowledge sharing and vicarious learning as a big community of practice. It has ceased to be that since the move to X, but these sort of generic platforms, I think, have a real appeal, but what they lack is some of that kind of formal boundary setting and quality control, perhaps, that you would see if it was an institution-specific resource.
The group of robotic surgeons, I'm curious to know how the kind of Facebook group, I'm sure they had like formal conferences and papers and journals or stuff like that they would also participate. And I'm curious how the kind of more informal Facebook thing compared with their kind of more formal organization as a group and what the impacts of each of those were on each other.
Yeah, we didn't study that directly, so I'm speculating here, but I would imagine based on what I've seen elsewhere, they're sort of complementary approaches, right? That informal interaction preserves a little bit of the messiness and the sort of immediacy that you wouldn't get by the time it's all cleaned up and made into nice slides at a conference, or certainly by the time it's through peer review and documented in that way. So I think they're symbiotic in that sense, that somebody publishes a peer-reviewed randomized trial of a new procedure, And then you get a bunch of people trying it out and posting their results to Facebook, and maybe then refining it. Like, oh, okay, so they found if you approach from this side instead of that side, there's less scarring and less damage. Great. Well, I've been trying to approach from this side, but what do you do with a patient who has blank, is overweight or underweight or has this pre-existing condition? All those little kind of messy nuances of how do you actually do the thing. I think those get sorted out quite nicely on Facebook in the same way we might expect them to get sorted out face to face in a more traditional office environment, right? Where there's that classic water cooler vicarious learning that's happening.